everybody. Welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast. We are the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Pawtucket and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I am the executive editor of SoxProspects.com, and joining me, the Big Poppy to my Manny Ramirez, is our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, more draft to talk about today after coming off a hot episode with Jim Callis.
You'll finally get our thoughts, huh?
Finally get our thoughts. We made him wait. You gotta keep him waiting. You gotta wait till you get him in the palm of your hand, and then you drop it on him, like the beat on a Avicii record.
Okay, I didn't know where you were going with that, but
I didn't
yes,
either until it came out of my mouth. Maybe It worked. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, we've got your emails. We've got our thoughts. We mostly got into what Jim's thoughts were last week on Friday. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. We're focusing on the draft again in this episode, everybody. So I know there's some things to talk about. There's Noah's song to talk about. We're going to hold off on that. There is, in theory, hopefully by the time you listen to this, an agreement for Major League Baseball to play. Maybe. Who knows?
Shruggy face, who knows?
Big old shruggy.
That's why we didn't talk about it today.
That's why we didn't talk about it today, because we have no idea what's happening. So we're going to talk about that on the next episode, presuming that there is something to talk about. So as always, we want to ask if you want to support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects. You can go over there and you can pledge a certain amount per episode of the podcast and you get certain perks. And as always, we want to shout out our $5 level Patreon supporters. That's Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Deb Kendall, Evan Kirkwood, Hurricanes 1, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, Andrew Wallen, David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Catrides, Ben NRI, Paul Denyer, Lyndall Martin, Cassandra Bukta, and James P. McMahon. Thank you all for your support. Again, patreon.com/SoxProspects. And, of course, we want to talk about what you want to hear about. So send us your emails to podcast@SoxProspects.com. We've already got some in the hopper for our next episode, but we want to add yours to it. So got questions, write them in. We'll hit them up on a future episode of the podcast. Sometimes the more advanced ones we have to kind of save. For example, Ian, we've got one dealing with like the antitrust exemption. Doesn't really fit with this episode. We're going to try and get to that one next time. So don't worry, we will eventually get to all of them. But make sure you hit us up. So now, a couple weeks back, the Red Sox selected 4 new members or brought in 4 new members as draft picks to their system. We, of course, recorded our Night 1 recap, as always, about the Red Sox selection of California high school second baseman Nick Yorke in the first round with the 17th pick overall. And in the next night, no second-round pick for the Red Sox, but with picks in rounds 3, 4, and 5. The Red Sox selected high school third baseman out of Mississippi, Blaze Jordan, University of Hawaii left-hander Jeremy Wu-Yelland, and Florida State left-hander Shane Drohan. An interesting group of guys, and at this point, the Red Sox have also now signed, 12 undrafted free agents, Ian?
Yeah, I think they have the most of any team in baseball.
Yeah. So they have been on top of the undrafted free agent game, picking up players for $20K a piece. So there's a heck of a lot to talk about. At this point, we hope that you've all listened to our podcast with Jim Callis of MLB.com, going through some of that. We're going to try not to just tread over the same ground that we tread with him, but there are certain things that we'd love to kind of talk about as well. Ian, how do you want to start this, Ian? Do we want to start with our takes on the strategy? I mean, we don't really need to intro it. But, I mean, what was your – after having some time to digest it, let's put it this way. After having some time to digest what the Red Sox did, what is your feeling about it? And I'll leave that kind of open-ended on purpose.
I'm torn because – like, as we talked about after night 1, this is something that I suggested they could do back in May when the punishment was handed down.
Right.
And at the time, it was like, I thought it was a decent idea. It made sense for where the farm was, try to get 2 higher end talents rather than 1 and then a couple other middling guys.
Right.
But it's interesting to me, and I think Jim kind of talked about it. It's just the two guys they took are just such risky profiles that it gives me some cause because I'm like, it ticks a few alarm bells in my head because it's like I like the idea, and I think that's what I would have done also if I was in their shoes. Mm-hmm. It's just the track record with right first and second baseman out of the high school game is not good for early round picks. Like, there's a reason that right second baseman don't get drafted in the first round for like high schoolers, that is, because it's just a very risky demographic. You know, you're already moving down the defensive position spectrum. So if you're playing second base, it means you can't play third base or shortstop. So you're going to end up in left field if you can't play second base. And like, so you're drafting that in the first round, and then in the third round, you know, your other big bonus guy is a right first baseman, most likely, who has legit power but has struggled against more advanced pitching in high school and has had conditioning issues in the past grade, and it seems like he's really turned that around. Mm-hmm. And like I've watched, I mean, I was looking at his numbers, and this shocked me. He didn't hit a home run this year. Blaze Jordan did not hit a home run in high school this year. Well, and he played 13 games.
I think, part of it too, though, is Mississippi, and this work cuts both ways, right? Mississippi, I mean, how many walks did he have?
7, not a lot.
Okay, interesting. I just wonder what he was getting in terms of pitches.
Right? But I mean, maybe he was pressing. But like last year, he hit 10 in 37 games. Mm-hmm. This year, he hit 0 in 13 games. Right. I mean, just something like, and I think it was, I don't remember who it was. It was either Kylie McDaniel or Keith Law mentioned that scouts who saw him this spring said their power wasn't showing up in game like it should. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's just a very risky profile. And I think a fair question is like, well, what's the difference between him and Triston Casas? Because Triston Casas was a first round pick who was a first base only. But I think the Casas thing is, first off, he's a left-handed hitting first baseman, which is, I mean, I don't know what it is, but people like left-handed hitters more. Like when it comes to like power hitters and guys with that profile, a corner guy who's a left-handed hitter is just preferred. And I think it's just with Casas, like it sounds like he has more feel at the plate than Jordan does. And
it's a much better hit tool.
Yeah, and and that leads to the hit tool is just better. And like the power seems comparable. Like Casas, I think, has 70 raw. Yeah. Maybe Jordan has 80. But like when you get that high, it's not that big of a difference.
When you get that high, it's like, great. How is it showing up in game?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it seems like Casas has a much better chance of his power actualizing than Jordan does.
Sure.
And so it's just, I'm not sure about the players. I like the strategy, but at the same time, when I'm like hearing stuff about the players, there are things that I like, and I really applaud them for just going out there and saying, this is our strategy. Like they clearly had Yorke as a top 20 player. I think Alex Spears said it in his article that he was a top 20 player on their board, and they have conviction, and they were willing to just kind of like put it on the table and say, we're taking our guys. You know, we have 4 picks.
We can't trade them.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we think that these 2 guys give us the best chance for like stars. And I think there's something commendable about that. And I think it's just going to be a fascinating draft to follow for the next couple of years between those 2 and then the 2 lefties.
Oh, and I mean, never mind that. How does it work out where these guys can't? I mean, what are they even going to do with them? I mean, I guess they're going to bring them down to whatever they have in Florida if there is something in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that they'll – and that's the thing. It's like, are we not going to see them until next – are they not going to work out with the team until next spring?
Right.
Like, I mean – and let's be honest, next spring, like –
who knows?
Are things going to be that much better? We don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's just such a weird time for baseball, and I just don't –
it'll be strange.
I like – yeah, as I said, I like the strategy, but the players, there are definite questions, and I think it's very risky.
Yeah, part of me really kind of wishes they'd gone with like a Pete Crow Armstrong there. But,
okay, see, I was kind of out on, the more I read about Pete Crow Armstrong, I'm kind of out on him.
Well, there's at least defensive value there, right? Like,
but
if he doesn't hit, at least there's defensive value. You know,
he doesn't have to about outfielders the Red Sox have taken early rounds out of the high school rank, though.
Okay, but I mean that doesn't. I mean,
I know.
College guys they've taken, and
I know it's just
there are questions about whether Bradley was going to hit after he had a down.
Fair. I just think it's with like Yorke, at least, like it sounds like Yorke's a better hitter than Carl Armstrong. Like,
yeah, and that's fair. And that's
because they're from the same area. They're both California guys. So.
I mean, here's what here's the thing.
Well, I guess not really, because isn't New York is Northern California, right?
Huh? Say that again. Yorke is NorCal, yeah.
Yeah, and Carl
he's from San Jose.
SoCal, because he's Harvard Westlake, but yeah.
Which is in LA, yeah. So they didn't really play each other or anything.
They're not the same region, but yeah.
No, I mean, here's the thing, is that I'm not going to sit here, look, we have a question and I'll read it, but I'm not going to sit here and say they should have taken this player here instead.
Well, no, because the thing is...
Do you know why I'm not going to say that?
Why?
I've never seen any of these guys play. To say.
We've never seen them play other than the video we watched in the couple weeks before the draft and the scouting reports we read online. And we don't know what team scouting reports look like before the draft. We don't know what they saw when they saw them in person. I think it summed it up well when you can probably speak to this better because you were on the call. But when they mentioned how many times they saw Yorke in person this year, and he only played, 7 games or something?
Yeah. Well, it was that, and it's like Paul Taboni talking about working him out one-on-one in December.
Yeah.
No one in the baseball media saw Nick Yorke work out in December. I doubt there were many teams that worked Nick Yorke out in December.
Yeah.
And if you're telling me, no, we watched this kid this many times, we're convinced he's a top 20 player, and by the way, we're going to save, even if it's just $750K.
Still, yeah.
To $1 million off of slot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Well, and actually,
you then spread to someone else.
I looked at the notes. They said that he played 7 games this year, and we must have had high level scouts.
Well, that's what they said
at 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, but I think Alex's article said that he had played 5 games, and they had scouts at 3 or 4 of them.
Well, it could have been scrimmages though. That's probably what they're counting.
Right, but I'm just saying like what they said on draft night without looking, and then they might have gone back and checked. It wasn't quite the same, but the point remains the same. When Tim Corbin says that he was arguably the best hitter in the high school class, I listen to what Tim Corbin says. The defensive questions I think are nothing, especially for a guy who's going to have to be, he's going to have to stick at second base. He's not his first baseman, right? So it'll be. Look,
certainly not. He's playing second base or it's left field.
They've got conviction. And they put it out on the table, and they took him. Would you rather they've had a Nick Bitz go? Would you rather they had XYZ guy? If they take those guys, they're not taking Blaze Jordan in the 3rd. They probably take Shane Drohan in the 3rd. Or Jeremy Wu-Yelland.
Yeah, because they could, if they take Wu-Yelland or
because
Drohan.
They said they were surprised that Drohan was still there in the 4th, never mind the 5th.
Yeah.
So they could have easily taken Drohan in the 3rd. Do you like a draft better where they take Bitsko and not a whole lot else? Heck, look at the groom draft, man. When you put all your eggs in one basket like that, and things can happen. I look, it makes sense. Look, the Red Sox didn't draft Nick Yorke at 17 overall, thinking he was like the 70th best player in the draft. I think it was Paul Taboni.
Well, Alex said in his article that the Red Sox, he said a Red Sox source told him he was in the top 20. Yeah.
I'm just saying, people who think that, the Red Sox draft board lined up with, the Baseball America or MLB draft board, that's not how it works. It didn't. I think Paul Taboni on night 2 on the conference call said something like, look, teams probably line up, a couple hundred guys. They're not lining up. How many picks are there in a 40-round draft? 40 times 30 is 1,200 picks. They're not lining up a 1,200 guy draft board. That's how different these teams' draft boards are, that they get all guys who are in their top 200-300 guys. So, this isn't a situation where they think, okay, well, let's take the 3rd round value guy because we're going to save money and take another 3rd round and take a 1st round value guy in the 3rd. That's not how it works. So I don't think it's quite as much of a gamble as people thought it was. It was a little bit of a gamble that someone they liked was going to get to them in 89, but it worked out that way, and they felt comfortable that would probably happen based on how different teams' draft boards are. So I don't have a problem with it yet. It's risky. I applaud them for having conviction. That said, how often do teams do this and it works out is the other thing. When's the last time that we kind of reacted to a pick like this? And I can't, actual question. When's the last time that a first round pick was this unpopular?
For the Red Sox?
Yeah.
Cameron Cannon last year. I don't know.
Well, but he's a second rounder, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between taking Cameron Cannon at 43 and Nick Yorke at 17.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
people didn't love the Tanner Houck pick at the time, I remember.
I guess that's true. That's true.
I had a lot of people questioning it, I remember, in social media.
But it's rankings-wise, that was where he was supposed to go, right?
Well, that's the thing. They haven't gone this far off board in the first round since. I'm trying to look back.
Heck, even Brannon, the guy that, you hate that pick. I don't think we're...
No, I said it at the time, too. It's not like a revisionist
But it's like, rankings-wise, 68th on MLB's list, 54th on BA's list, 52 on Perfect Games list.
Yeah. I'm looking back, they have never done something like this Yorke pick.
No, they haven't.
Well, that's what I think.
But it's also a unique spring, right? They were convinced on the call that if he got to play this spring, he would have moved up draft boards. And that's not, people are like, well, doesn't that work for everyone? Doesn't everybody get more reps? It's no, what they're saying is he was so much better than he was as a junior that he, more than what you would normally expect. They think that he would have moved up draft boards. They think he would have shown that the arm was back. I don't know. We'll see. We've talked a lot about Yorke, and let's talk a little bit about... Go ahead.
Well, no, I think we should talk about, just Yorke a little bit, though. We
already had a full podcast just about him.
No, I know. Oh, yeah, you're right. But I just...
That's why
I understand. I see what you're saying. But I was just going to... I think... I do... The more I'm talking... I'm talking to people about him, the more I like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing about the hit tool. The hit tool is the tool that I care about more than anything else.
And that's the thing. It's if he can hit, you can figure out the other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If he is a 6 hit, even if it's a 50 power, or as Jim Cal suggested, he's heard some people throw a 6 potential on it. If that's what it becomes, you can figure out the position. It doesn't matter, because that's a legitimate number, number middle of the order pad. So it's I like the hit tool a lot, but it's just the injury thing is really concerning to me.
The shoulder, yeah.
As someone who has undergone a shoulder surgery and not recovered to the point where I can throw very much or play baseball or do any of that stuff anymore, and then the idea that he has anchors in his shoulders, which you can't get rid of, I guess. That's just that's a red flag. That just really... Well,
they made clear that they looked at the physical and they were okay with it.
Okay. So anchors are... you
put them in. Yeah, I know you've been a little confused on this. Anchors isn't a condition. It's a thing they put in to fix it.
Yeah, so they stay in there.
Yeah. It's like having a screw or something.
Oh, okay.
It's permanent.
Yeah. But it's those can have issues, can arise from them. How often do you hear about someone who has a screw in their foot having to get it removed after the fact because it caused issues? I think about more in terms of basketball, honestly. Gordon Hayward is the example I think of. But I don't know, just the idea, the injury thing is definitely a concern. But I like the bat, and everyone I've talked to really likes the bat. Talking to scouts who saw him briefly, they both on video and then occasionally in game. It wasn't this year, but in previous years, they said that there's a chance he can hit. So, and in a system, we talk about it. Some question I got a lot on Twitter was well, how does he fit with the players they already have in the system? Because if you think about it, let's just say I was going to get there. Way to jump the gun.
Sorry.
But they were basically saying, doesn't that create a logjam with middle infielders with Anthony Flores, Matthew Lugo, Cannon, et cetera, in the low minors? And my point was that's something you just figure out. You don't care. As you said, it's you play him at DH, you move someone to third base, you put maybe Cannon. You figure it out when you get there. And I think especially this year, it's not as big a deal.
Yeah. And I think too, because I think part of the point of that tweet was especially, I remember that tweet because it is a fair-ish point of like, how are they going to find these guys at bats? And I think part of the context was if there's no short season, right? If you don't have the little spinners in short season or whatever winds up happening with their ladder, right? If short season doesn't exist, your concept of what a high A player has to change. So jumping Cameron Cannon to high A is maybe not quite as big of a deal. Or you're more, you have more in-season promotions where like, okay, this guy's been good for a couple months, like let's get him up to the next level. Not that that's the rule, but you're more willing to do that. So I think you find room. Every time we've ever had a conversation since the start of the site about them having a log jam at a position, it has worked itself out. Like, how are they going to deal with Devers and Chavis both being third baseman at the same level? Guess what? It worked itself out. Mm-hmm. I remember one point where there's like, they have all of these shortstops. I don't think a single one of them made the majors. Like I remember like Juan Soto like era, like way back in like the, 05 era. They had all these shortstops. I don't think any of them made the majors. Mm-hmm. So look, I mean, these things are actually, that might be wrong because one of them might have been Hanley. If Hanley was one of them, I take that back. But anyway, these things, the cream rises to the top, as Randy Savage would put it. So you deal with it. It works out. So let's move on to Blaze Jordan. Blaze Jordan, high schooler out of Mississippi. We've talked about him a fair amount on here and with Jim. A lot of pop. I actually think where I'm hearing more about Nick Yorke and that pick's growing on me, the more I hear about the Blaze Jordan pick, the less I like it.
Yeah, there's definitely red flags.
But it's a third rounder, so.
Yeah, but that's the trade off. It's right. Like,
who cares? Not who cares, but for a third rounder, if you're going to get that kind of upside, cool. When Jim Callis is telling me this guy might turn into a 40 home run guy and a third rounder, all right. I'm down.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was about to say. If you tell me he's Bobby Dahlbeck, I'll be like, yeah, that's a win. Because like Dahlbeck's like a 230, 35 home run guy probably if he can hit big league pitching. So yeah, I mean, I just think the thing with Yorke is that it's clear he's getting a hit. It's just the question is just power. I mean, but everyone thinks he's going to hit.
Best tool. Yeah.
Yes. Whereas with it's just concerning because I've seen them draft guys with big power who have like questionable hit tool projections, and some of them, make it to the high minors and have a chance to the big leagues. Guys like Dahlbeck, but other guys like I'm thinking like Will Middlebrooks, Josh Ockamy.
Ockamy was the one that came to mind for me because of high school.
Seth Schwindenhammer,
Schwindenhammer's different. Schwindenhammer was a late round pick.
No, he was a 5th round pick.
Was he? Oh my gosh! All right,
maybe a 4th pick. Let me look. He was, what year was he drafted? 2010?
Maybe.
He was a 5th round pick in 2009.
All right.
But another one I was going to say is like Bryce Brents. Like I've seen the guys.
A college guy, but yeah.
No, I know, but I'm just talking, or David Renfro, another example.
Did Renfro have that kind of pop? Honest question.
Yeah, he had power, but he just couldn't hit it all.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's just it's tough. If you don't hit, the power doesn't really matter. And I think Jim said it well. It's like he's a high ceiling, low floor. And if it doesn't work, he might get to AA and, strike out 250 times and never get above that level.
Right.
Or if they make a few changes and he does hit, then he's a potential monster. So it's like, there's not a lot of in between with the pick. And yeah, it seems as you kind of mentioned, I don't remember where that, or if it was on the previous podcast, that the people writing about the draft were not huge fans of this pick. It seems. I believe
Yorke or Jordan.
Jordan.
Yeah.
The recaps I read from some of the big sites were pretty scathing about him.
I mean, but it's also the other thing that I can't get my head around. I get why Triston Casas reclassifies, right? Because he's the example of the guy that Jim talked about where you reclassify to become age appropriate. Like Blaze Jordan reclassifies and becomes super duper young. Maybe the point is to get good coaching, right? He's in Mississippi. And he's on area code games and stuff like that and all that kind of thing. But, maybe it's just to get into a pro system and get, a pro hitting coach. I don't know. It's intriguing. I like it.
the TrackMan and like the advanced metrics are crazy on him. Like
on
his bat speed,
exit
velos. There's one more. I can't remember what it was. Let me look at the page, the numbers. But yeah, that stuff. Like, and then the combo of his age, and I think this is one of our emailers on the last show mentioned it. Like on the analytical models, the reason he was so good was because of those. When you combine that stuff with his age, that's kind of what some of those models are based off.
Yeah, they like the age.
Yeah, like that stuff, the impact momentum, like things like this, like everything's in like the 99.9th percentile. Mm-hmm. And it's just, that stuff is crazy good, but it's just, how does it play if you have to hit the ball for that to work.
Right.
And so that's, what we need to see, given that it's very unlikely he'll add much defensive value. I think it's a worthy gamble though, because like at the end of the day, looking at who was left in the third round, I wasn't overly enthused by much of anyone left. Do you know what I mean?
The guys like Tanner Witt, I think, was one of the guys left, but he's going to school.
He's going to school now, and his number, who knows what it was? It probably was more, frankly, than Jordan, I would guess.
Might have been more than Yorke's.
Yeah, I just think that given what was left, I don't know if they had a very long list of guys to give that money to. And they clearly like Jordan a lot, though, as you said. I don't know if you want to talk about what they said on the call about him, because we haven't recorded since then.
Yeah, so I mean, they said they didn't think he was going to fall. They think he's a unique talent. He's got a ton of power upside, good feel to hit, recognizes pitches early, and he's a year younger than his counterparts. Very unusual to have that kind of power in this kind of young player. Probably more unusual is pairing that up with our optimism and how he'll hit in time. There's innate traits he has that are hard to teach, including how he processes a pitch out of the hand, how he translates that to action. So this isn't something where they're putting numbers in a machine and it spits out Pick Blaze Jordan because he's 17 and has all kinds of exit velo. I don't know if there was anything in particular that you were thinking of, Ian, that I didn't get to. But
the other thing I was just going to say is, like, Danny Watkins' track record is very good when it comes to guys. Like, he's one of, I would say, there's a reason he's been in the system or as a scout for that area for I don't know how long. I don't remember the last time there was a different Mississippi scout, honestly. Or Mississippi, Tennessee, that area.
Mississippi, Tennessee, and I think he's got Alabama.
But his track record with the early round guys is quite good. And, it's one of those things that if Danny Watkins saw something there, I think that I'm going to trust his judgment because he's seen him a lot more than I have, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, it could have been wrong, who knows, but we'll find out when we see him. But I feel like Jordan's going to be someone that we're going to know pretty quickly whether or not it's going to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like Yorke, it could be more of a slow burn. It's going to take some time, but I think Jordan, it's going to be like pretty clear. Because like there are certain guys you just kind of know or not if they're going to hit, and I wonder if he's going to be one of those guys.
He being Jordan.
Correct.
Yeah. It's like, remember when we were talking about Dahlbeck and his strikeout issues, right? With Dahlbeck, it's like he's a college hitter. Give him a chance to make the correction. You don't always see high school guys making that correction necessarily, I feel like. So just to give people an idea, I mean, Danny Watkins, there's really no other big guys in the system for him right now. I mean, he obviously signed and scouted Mookie Betts. Other guys in the system, it's Dylan Hardy, Adam Lau, Steven Scott. He had signed Chris Madera.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like the big money guys is who I'm really focusing on.
No, Robbie Sexton. Kevin Steen was a Danny Watkins guy.
But in terms of his big money guys, it's like what
Lucas
Mookie Betts is. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Let's move on to the college guys. Like I said in the last podcast, 5th year in a row, they took 2 college arms in the first couple rounds. Drohan excites me more than Wu-Yelland. It's kind of interesting to me that they took them in the order that they did.
Well, I don't think that. I think it's just that they probably wanted to get Wu-Yelland and they needed to save some money. And once he was in,
we'll see what he signs for, but.
Well, right, but I think it was just they wanted to get Wu-Yelland in, and then Drohan was there in the 5th round, and they had I think Drohan's getting over slot. He has not signed as when we were recording this, but
Yeah, that, he's the one, as you said, that I think is more interesting. He's got the pedigree as he was a high school quarterback, I believe, and was highly rated coming out of high school.
Right.
Seems really athletic. I think they talked about on the call, then they say he's like a blank slate, or I don't remember what the term is.
They talked about how he was a two-sport player in high school.
He's got room to grow, or what was they had some phrase, I can't remember what it was.
So much runway left, just scratching the surface. We didn't think he was going to be there in the fourth, really. We were happy to consider him there. It looks like, when he throws, it looks like it's not taking much effort, and he's throwing 94, 95. He's got things they like. I mean, when I watch him throw, the body reminds me a lot of Song. Drohan.
Yeah, it's like loose. I think Chris Merfy, he reminds me so much of Chris Merfy. Like, the fact that they have similar builds. I guess Murphy's a little shorter, but
both lefties, right?
They both are lefties. They both struggle to throw strikes in college, but they had good peripherals, like good spin rate on the breaking ball. Fastball gets up to like 95. Really athletic types that they can, which means you think if they tweak a few things with the delivery, maybe you get the fastball command in line. Like, he just strikes me a lot in that vein, and I think that I do like him, and I think he's someone that when we debut him in the rankings, people will be surprised how high he is. Because
Drohan, yeah.
Yes, because he's going to be, I think, higher than, I think by the time I finish it, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in my top 30.
I think he's almost certainly going to be in mine.
If
he isn't, it might be he's just outside because I'm not accounting for the guys entering ahead of him.
Exactly. So, yeah, I like the Drohan pick a lot, and just like kind of a primer you can check out. We have scouting reports for all the draftees on the site. I put them all up already. They're based on information just from talking to people, and then also obviously from the available info we have on the net and from the sources that have seen them. But it's fastball, curveball, changeup. He's got that pedigree we talked about, and I think the pedigree matters. His dad played in minor leagues. He was drafted out of high school. Uber athletic, and he just strikes me as like there's more upside than your normal college guy,
right.
And I like that. I like that pick, and I was a fan of that pick when it was made. And then I think Wu-Yelland. I think Wu-Yelland has a little more reliever risk, but he's obviously
he was
he's
a
been
reliever at Hawaii.
Yeah, but they're going to try and transition him, which they've done before. But he was up to 97, which is from the left side. And I like that because it's like, worst case, you just stick him in the bullpen. And if he's up to 97 from the left side, you can figure out how to make that work. Mm-hmm. So, he was interesting. And then I think we should probably transition and talk about the undrafted guys since there's so many.
We didn't really talk about them with Jim. So let's talk about the undrafted guys. The Red Sox, at the time we're recording this, are up to 12. Undrafted free agents. Do you want to just go through them one by one really quick, Ian? And let's not linger too long on any one of them.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably easier just to kind of lump them into groups because I think it's interesting what they've done.
So, the arms is the big group. I mean,
they're targeting college relievers who throw hard.
Yeah.
And except for like two guys who are like depth starters, or except for Van Belle. Van Belle's a separate category, I think, than everyone else.
Let's start with Van Belle, maybe, because Jim was talking about how he's going to potentially be on his list of top undrafted free agents. Van Belle was the Friday night starter at Miami in 4 starts this year. His ERA was 0.68, 26 and a third innings, 38 Ks to 4 walks. I'm kind of surprised this guy didn't get picked. Honestly,
I'm not.
He's older. He's 23.
He would have been picked. He would have been picked in round 6 to 10.
Yeah, he's round. He's 23 years old, which is the problem. But athletic pitcher's frame. Fastball's 89 to 92, topping out at 93, and that's part of it too. Circle change.
Best pitch.
Yeah.
He's just this pitchability type. He's the kind of guy
better than Brian Brown. I mean, you made the comp to Brian Brown.
Well, no, that was just as a senior out of the
I hear you, but I'm saying I think it's...
Oh, he would have been like probably my favorite senior sign. He's this type of guy who would go to Lowell and just dominate.
Yeah.
And because he's someone who I would not be surprised at all if he has a very long career. And I'm not, maybe he gets up to the big leagues as a back end starter. But if not, he's someone who you'll probably be comfortable throwing out every 5th day in the minors for years to come. You know what I mean?
Yeah, until he's a free agent. Yeah.
And he's the type of guy you need. I like that signing a lot. I think I'm very pro guys throwing strikes in the low minors, especially. So. So I like that. I like that pickup a lot. And then I think the other starter is Jordan DiValerio, who it's funny. I think he's more well known now because of the infamous Chris Sale call that everyone's been writing about.
What it was. I mean, they had Chris Sale call him, although it's misleading the way it was been reported that he like called to recruit him. But if you actually read the article, he's like, yeah, when he called, at that point he'd already agreed to sign, so he just didn't really give him a sales pitch. It's like, well, that's what you just said he did. Like,
yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, but at any rate, I mean, you look at the low minors. I mean, the Greenville rotation's pretty loaded, but you've got a lot of young guys who, might need to come out of games early, might be on pitch counts, things like that. Getting these college arms in there to eat up innings makes sense. So you're not straining your bullpen every
and exactly, and that's the thing I think is that in terms of what they have in the system, they have plenty of, I think position player wise, they're in pretty good shape. Yep. Like even if we were to say they don't play this year and let's just fast forward the rosters to next year, like position player wise, they're in good shape. Like there's guys on the benches of all of the projected teams we have currently that I like Steven Scott's someone I think they'd be comfortable starting. You go up to like Salem, like Michael Osinski, same thing. You know what I mean? Whereas in the pitching staff, there are some questions. Yeah. You can never have enough pitching in the minors, and there's some names on here of guys that I just don't think are very good.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think these guys fit in terms of DiValerio, like Van Belle is someone I think they're going to probably run out as a starter. 4-pitch guy out of St. Joe's. He threw really well against, I want to say it was Ohio State this year. He threw 5 innings, gave up 1 hit, 9 strikeouts. Right. And that was like the biggest name team he played this year. He was someone actually who thought he was going to get drafted. I read an interesting article talking about how he basically thought he was going to get drafted last year, and then he didn't. And then he was going to the Cape, and then they yanked his spot, and he ended up back in the NECBL where he'd been an all-star the year before. And but I just, he seems athletic, up to 94, splitter, changeup, breaking ball. So seems like a solid, and he throws strikes too, which I like. And it was interesting looking at the juxtaposition between the starting guys and then the relievers who, let's just say some of them don't really throw strikes.
No, I mean, let's just kind of go through those guys. The kind of interesting one is one of the first names we saw was Jacinto Arredondo.
Yeah.
Out of Tampa.
I like it. I think his delivery's fantastic.
Well, his delivery and his story is crazy. Chris Smith at Mass Live, did a story about him. And talking about, he was born with a leg defect, like he was like basically a club foot. They needed to reconstruct his ankle at 2 years old. He had committed to Auburn out of high school, but says he lost a scholarship when the team's coach was fired before he showed up. So he went to community college and then went to D2 Tampa. He has the Carter Capps hop step,
which it's legal though because he keeps his foot on the ground.
Does he?
He drags it. He doesn't actually hop.
Yeah. So he's
it's funky.
92, 94 is what we have with a hard slider. So that's kind of interesting. Who's the one who's up to 100? Merfy Andrew?
Yeah, but I think just Arredondo is someone who, just in general, just talk about these relievers. I like the strategy because when it comes to relievers, I'm a big advocate of just find as many as you can, stick them in the bullpen, and see who throws strikes and has success. Mm-hmm. There's no real rhyme or reason with a lot of these guys. When I think back, like Kyle Martin. Kyle Martin was like 10K. Ben Taylor was another one. I think they signed for 5K. Who's the other? Bobby Pointer. Like guys come out of nowhere for the bullpen, whereas I think it's a lot harder to find these 20K guys who develop into everyday position players or even starting pitchers.
Right.
So that's why I like the idea of just going after bullpen guys. And Arredondo, it's funky. He throws hard. He missed bats. He's got a good track record. He pitched at D2 Tampa, who won the D2 World Series in 2019. He was the tournament MVP. So he's pitching some big games. I think it's an interesting arm. And then, as you said, I think Merfy Andrew is the one that is just fascinating to me because he's old, or he's older. He's 23 already. He was born in the Dominican Republic, but he's up to 101. And I watched a video of him throwing, and there's some jump on that fastball. Like it really gets in there quick. And it seems like this year, he started throwing a little more strikes. He struck out 38 guys in 29 innings this year too. He misses a ton of bats, but he also walks a ton of guys. So he's an interesting guy to me. And then another righty who big fastball doesn't throw as many strikes as Cole Miram. They signed him out of
Milam.
Milam, Southern Illinois Edwardsville, which I think is D1. But he's like 93 to 95 with a curveball and a slider, trouble throwing strikes, but he throws hard and he's listed at 6'4", 250. So he's a big boy. And it's just, and then, And then another one. Well, I already talked about him.
You got him, okay, yeah.
And then another one, Masayo Campbell, who's out of Longwood, which is where Kyrie Washington, current Red Sox scout, went there, and so did Michael Osinski, who I mentioned earlier, earned in the minors. But he's like a really athletic guy who fastball tops out in the mid-90s, but his control is inconsistent. Like, I think he walked 13 guys this year in 14 innings or something. I have it on my Twitter page. Yeah. But he pitched as both a starter and a reliever for Longwood in 7 appearances. So he's another guy, just athletic, arm strength guy. And then I think the last of the relief type was Graham Hoffman out of South Florida. And he's actually pretty interesting to me because he's on the younger side. Most of these guys are like 22, 23. He's actually only 21. I believe he's a redshirt sophomore. He had a couple years of eligibility left. And he hasn't pitched very much this year because he just had Tommy John. But I think it was someone on Twitter, one of the college baseball guys who cover it, was just tweeting about a South Florida game earlier this year and mentioned how they liked what they saw out of him. He was up to 94, and he only threw 5 innings this year. So just an interesting guy, see what they have there. And then I'm trying to think anymore. That's it for the college arms. And I think the last couple of guys, the college bats, and then the Puerto Rican high school guys. Do you want to talk about the college bats a little bit, and then we can finish up with the high school guys, because I think they're probably the most interesting.
Yeah.
Other than Van Belle, sorry.
Well, we talked about Van Belle, no?
Well, no. I'm saying I said the Puerto Rican guys are the most interesting, other than Van Belle.
Juan Montero is a catcher. It's the kind of stereotypical Puerto Rican catcher at this point. That's what the island produces.
They've drafted. I was looking back. The Red Sox have drafted a lot of guys out of Puerto Rico, and catching. I mean, they drafted Alan Marrero.
Vasquez, obviously.
Yeah. But Montero seems like interesting. Like, he's got some.
Yeah, he's an athlete. I like the bat speed. We've shown some video. He's apparently shown some power potential. Could drive the ball. Good arm. Above average pop times. Getting a guy like that into the system is a good thing.
Yeah, and then I think like Henry Nunez Rijo, similarly, like he's someone whose velocities continue to tick up. And it's interesting. I was going to mention this when we were talking to Jim, but I forgot to. That as a good example, Nunez Rijo is like 2 years older than Blaze Jordan.
Yeah,
he's 19 already.
Yeah.
But he's someone who's like up to 94 from the right side, good frame. Breaking ball, changeup, just on the raw side, but you can work with a guy who's up to 94 as a 19-year-old, like an arm strength guy.
Yeah,
so
especially for 20K. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jake MacKenzie out of Fordham is a speed guy, athletic infielder, average build, minimal remaining projection. MacKenzie stole apparently only 7 bases this year, but I think last year he was 4th in the country in stolen bases in Division 1. Yeah, so he's a speed guy. Has some swing and miss in his game, though. But
it's like position versatility.
Could play the infield. Shortstop in college. He'll move around the infield. He's that college infielder that they go and get. Let's see. Who else do we still have to talk about? Cuba Bess, I guess, is the only guy left, right?
No, Jose Garcia.
I was talking about Montero. Yeah, Jose Garcia, catcher, first baseman out of FIU. Florida International, but I guess he only DH'd this year. It was weird.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what the deal is with that. That's not his scouting report on his page.
No. He's got legit power. I think he has something like 26 home runs in his career. And he's someone too, I just thought was interesting that the Red Sox had drafted him out of high school, which I thought was of note. In the 38th round back in 2017, they took him. So, but he's also,
for a minute.
Yeah, he's played some catcher and first base too, but it seems like he's more a hitter,
he's a hitter who you find a spot.
If he hits. And then, Cuba Bess, I think, is the last guy.
Out of Grand Canyon University, where they drafted Chad De La Guerra from.
Yep.
Junior first baseman. Waiting for it to load. Yeah.
It's good left-handed swing.
Yeah.
Feel for hit, strong plate discipline. He's got some raw power. He was drafted out of high school by the Rockies back in 2016. He's on the older side, though. I think he's almost 23. Or he would have turned 23 this year. And he's someone who was injured this year at a hamstring injury, so he was just coming back at the time when the season kind of got going. But I think it was D1Baseball.com did a ranking of like the top college hitters using some like combining like hit, plate discipline, power, and he was in the top 20 of that list, which I think is kind of interesting. So he's someone with somewhat of a good track record. I think his career hit line is pretty good. So yeah, I mean, interesting guy, and they kind of, if you look at the system right now, there's at first base, there's not a lot in the low minors. So I think, it's Joe Davis and like Dom DeSandro. It's a bunch of senior signs.
Yeah,
which
our
he more or less
rosters, I think we probably had Dom DeSandro at first and Lowell. Yeah, and I mean, I guess we had Feliz in the Gulf Coast League.
But like, he's someone who could easily play over those two guys. So even as much as I love Joe Davis, if he can hit, so
Feliz.
No, I'm not talking about. He would never go to the GCL. He's going to be 23. I was talking about him Lowell.
Okay. Well, you said those two guys, and I had just said two guys.
No, I was talking about the two I mentioned. But yeah, so kind of interesting. But who knows with these guys? And as Jim said in the last episode, if you haven't listened to that, make sure to check it out. The priority, undrafted free agents haven't really signed. So these guys are like this school. I mean, the guys who would have taken $50K or less probably after the 20th round. Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting. I think that the Red Sox are kind of going all in on those guys, whereas some other systems or other teams are not signing anyone.
Yeah, yeah. So I like it. I mean, they're restocking the system.
Well, I guess maybe a good time to go to emails. Yeah. I actually have one that kind of plays off of what we just talked about.
Ahead. This is a Twitter. It's a Twitter.
Yeah, this is a Twitter question from Kurg on Twitter, and his question was, while a 5-round draft may not have been beneficial to players, how beneficial do you think it was to the Red Sox as a team, as we've now seen them ink 12 prospects at this point? Could this be someone like Chaim Bloom's dream scenario?
No.
And yeah, I think I see where you're coming from when talking about how, they've been one of the most active teams. But at the end of the day, these are not the priority guys they would have gone after. You look at past drafts, the number of guys they've signed for over 125K is close to 10 or something. And, in this draft, they get 4 and then a bunch of 20K free agents. I think they would have much rather had a normal 40-round draft. And yeah. I think if there was a 40-round draft, they would have taken a lot of these guys. Then they would have had, the other 5 picks in the top 5-10 rounds to spend over 125K on, and then other pool money to spend after the 10th round. So, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I think what they are doing a good job of is they're taking advantage of limited competition and kind of just, doing the best they can with the situation. But I think they would have, if you asked Chaim Bloom, they would have much preferred a normal draft.
Yeah, everyone's just kind of like, this is Chaim Bloom bringing the Rays way of doing things to the Red Sox. No. What's the Rays way of doing things? The Rays didn't go cheap on the draft. They spent just as much money as anyone. So it's, I think there's a tendency to read more into things when a guy like Chaim Bloom's new. But I don't think that that's the case. Going through our rest of our inbox, Dan Gallo sends in a question. He says, it seems to me that Blaze Jordan was a pretty sexy, quote unquote, pick for the 3rd round. What's the general feeling about why he fell that far? Is he overhyped, or are there genuine concerns about him not signing? We've hit on most of that, Ian. First of all, they're not taking him in the 3rd round if there's concerns about him signing. They wouldn't have used one of their 4 picks on a guy who wasn't going to sign. Overhyped? Put it this way, and this is something I meant to mention with regard to Jordan, Ian. Tell me if you agree. I do fear that there's a chance for some Dalton Furbushing of Blaze Jordan. That's what they called Durbin Feltman on, shout out to our friends over at Section 10. But people hear about this reliever with a blazing fastball who's going to be in the majors next year. You need to know the name, and everyone knows the name, and it's expected he's going to be a stud.
Oh, yeah. He's going to be more popular than
Blaze
guys
Jordan,
in the top 5.
I think Blaze Jordan is going to be 15-ish, 12 to 15-ish. 10 to 15
range, yeah. I don't know exactly.
On our list, on a bottom half system, he's got exciting traits. He's not it's not like a miracle he lasted to 3rd. And we talked about that with Jim last week, so we won't belabor the point. But I also don't know that he's overhyped. I just think just be careful of reading too much into the fact that he's got 80 pop.
Yeah, I think it was just if you look at the rankings and everything, he was kind of went like where I think it was what BA had him in like the 90s, and so did I think ESPN and Keith Law I think also did. But then you had Perfect Game and MLB had him higher. And if you go by some of those lists, he kind of went where he's projected to go, whereas other ones he was supposed to go higher. I just think he was a name that people knew. And let's be honest, after the draft, most people, even people who pay a lot of attention to baseball, only know the first like 10, 15 picks. After that, a lot of the names. So I think it's interesting, but I just wouldn't. I think he's going to get. We shouldn't hype him up too much just because he's someone who is internet famous already.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like, my thought is almost like Robert Williams, the Celtic. That's Time Lord's first name, right? Williams, Robert
Williams III, please.
Robert Williams III, sorry. Can jump out of the gym, athletic as hell, but, like, that doesn't make him Giannis. You know what I mean? Like...
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you watch video, he has really cool block shots that like do well on Twitter, and it's the same thing with like Blaze Jordan hitting 500-foot home runs is kind of like
in BP
as a 13-year-old
in BP. It's not like it's in game action, right? It's like
or winning like the MLB home run derby during the All-Star game last year, things like that, like play well in this day and age in like the modern media world, but that doesn't translate to on-field. Put it this way,
because we there was a response to someone saying that Jordan hit 500-foot home runs at age 13 on our forum, but the guy said, isn't like the farthest ball ever hit at Fenway 500 some odd feet, the red seat that Ted Williams hit? And it's like, yeah, that's in game. That's completely different. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. It's like, okay, great. He can hit 500-foot, BP home runs.
He's got raw power.
He's got all kinds of raw power, and that's awesome. And that's great that they got that in the third.
If we do a raw power, tool ranking, which might happen at some point this offseason, you never know. Yeah. He's going to be in the top two.
We got to run the things we're planning to run first.
I know. I said maybe.
Yeah. All right. Next question comes from, I don't know that we got a name. Doug from Wisconsin. He said, when the Red Sox made their first pick, I was quite upset. We had not drafted this high in several years and may not again in the future. This draft, in my opinion, had a lot more talent than most. Being Wisconsin and watching it with my Brewer fans made the 2-day draft far more interesting. I personally like the Brewers draft better. I even thought the Astros draft was as good. My question for you guys, who would you have drafted when the Red Sox were on the clock and why? He says he would have drafted Garrett Mitchell or Nick Bitsko. They were both very talented players with upside, unless their asking price was too high. We need more elite talent, more than depth in the low minors. If we had a 10-round draft, I could have understood the pick. If 500K plus under slot, a lot easier. Thank you again. Thanks, Doug. My response to that is that I've never seen any of these guys play, and I don't have someone who I would have drafted.
Yeah. I don't know anything close compared to what the teams do. And the Red Sox had Nick Yorke valued in the top 20. So, I mean, at this point,
I think that I assume they're right.
No. And, like, I would like to see, like, given the information I had, would I have taken him? Obviously not. I didn't even know who he was until they took him.
Right.
Like, I'd never heard of him. I'll be honest. I did a decent amount of prep for this year's draft, and I think you would agree more than we do in usual years.
Yep.
Because most of the time,
because there's nothing else to do.
Well, yeah, but like Nick Yorke was not a name I came across at all.
Yeah.
Well, so like that's the thing. It's like it's hard for me to say like who I would have taken when the guy they ended up taking who they had in their top 20 I'd never heard of.
Right.
So
right, and that's exactly why. I mean, look, we at Sox Prospects we cover the draft to some degree, right? And I think, like you said, Ian, this year we were a little bit more involved in it. The years we're more involved in are either
they pick higher.
When there's a global pandemic and there's no games for us to watch, or B, the years where they've had like the number 7 or the number 12 pick.
Correct.
Those are the years we really pay attention.
Because at the end of the day, as Jim talked about on the interview last week, after the top like 10, 15 picks, it can go so many different ways. No one has any clue.
Right. So yeah, and that's why it's just look, I could tell you the guy. Look, the Trey Ball year. I think you can quibble with the Trey Ball year.
I think we did at the time
because Austin Meadows was there,
and they had the thing that gets me with the Meadows pick is his hitting coach was a scout for them.
Yeah, that was the weird.
That is like
but it's just kind of like
yikes.
if you did the research, and I'm not saying just look at Baseball America's list and should say they should have taken the 9th ranked prospect instead of the 12th ranked prospect or whatever. I'm sorry, if you do that, that's dumb.
And we're not saying Baseball America is
not that Baseball America is dumb. I'm saying that's not the point of the list.
No.
The point of the list is 9 versus 39, 9 versus 109, not 9 versus 12. Mm-hmm. Right? But if you watch the video and you read their scouting reports and you talk to people about these guys, and it's okay, you know what? That guy should have gone here. Great. But, I don't think you could do that even at 17. 17 isn't drafting at even 12 where they got groomed.
Well, I think I don't know if I mentioned this on a podcast previous. I usually, after the draft, I'll get to see a lot of scouts and a lot of amateur scouts come and cover the Penn League. And I'll talk to them and not the Penn League and actually other leagues too, frankly. They get put out on pro coverage. And I'll talk to them about the draft. And there's been multiple times where we've talked about Red Sox first round picks at the end of the first round, and guys have been yeah, I didn't have him as a first round grade. I had him a 5th round grade. Right. Or I had him as an 8th round grade, or I had him as a 3rd round grade. It's all over the board. So that's why which just shows how even with as much information as these websites have, and the websites, a lot of them go out, do in-person scouting. At the end of the day, it's all going to depend on how the team views the player. And that's why, it's hard to say who we would take, because I don't have enough information to be able to make an accurate prediction.
Or even Triston Casas. I can still remember going to a Potomac game and meeting up with a special assignment guy for a team. And he said, I don't know how Casas lasted till 26. I had him as a top half of the first round guy.
Well, and that's the thing. Even within an organization, there's often disputes, because teams will send in, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different guys to see the first round picks, the guys they're considering. And they're all going to come away with different reports.
Yep, exactly. Our next question comes from Matthew in Texas. He says, do you think the Kansas City's decision not to cut players recently had anything to do with their ability to sign several highly rated players? We talked about this a little bit with Jim, Ian, but I think it doesn't hurt.
I think absolutely.
Yeah, certainly doesn't hurt.
And I think it wasn't just the decision not to cut players, because the Red Sox, they did cut players, but it wasn't they signed the most guys, and it was guys they would have cut anyway. Let's be honest.
I mean, yeah, probably. I mean,
but I think
the
it was
teams
more,
that cut 60 guys.
Yeah, I think it was more I think the Dayton Moore thing is a bigger deal, because that's so visible. Him coming out, making that impassioned or plea or whatever you want to call it, and discussion of why this is our values as an organization. We're not, doing this. We're not doing this. We believe in our people, blah, blah, blah. That is, I think, what resonated with the players and the agents. And that's what was more important, I feel than just the not cutting people. Because, I mean, you look at some of the teams that cut the most players have signed guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I mean, the teams that cut players, there's more opportunity in those organizations right now. You can make that argument. Because they've cleared more room.
Who was it? Arizona cut 60 guys, I think you told me.
Yeah.
I mean, they've only signed one guy. But I know I believe the Reds released a decent number of guys, and they've signed 10. The teams that haven't signed any really
Well, look at it this way. If you're a middle infielder, we just got done talking about how jammed the middle infield is in the lower minors. Mm-hmm. You're going to look at that before you sign with the Red Sox.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think you look at that. We kind of talked about it. Look who signed with them. It's corner infielders, which they do not have a lot of. We just did the corner infield series.
The lower minors, yeah.
They don't have a lot of college corner infielders in the lower minors. They have Albert Feliz, who might even be an outfielder technically. And if he's an outfielder, they don't have anyone really in the low minors. But they don't have anything there really. And then it's pitchers, where you can never have enough pitching. Oh, and catching and catchers, which we know they don't have any catchers in the system. So it's it makes sense the guys they targeted.
Yep, exactly. Our dude Mark, Ian, we kind of quickly got into his questions, but I just want to read them out a little fuller here on the Blaze Jordan pick. First, Blaze Jordan was reported to be a darling of more model-driven front offices because he was so young for his class with elite exit velos, but as noted in his report on the site, he's already really well built and doesn't have a ton of room for physical projection. Do you think the latter detracts from the former? If he already has a mature approach, quick hands, good bat speed, is his development primarily in pitch recognition, further improving his approach? I guess I'm not sure that his youth is especially valuable when he has a right first base profile that does not have a lot of room for physical growth. Hope I'm being overly skeptical. And then he's got another question, but just to hit with that first. It's an astute observation, and that's why
the dudes
in our scouting report.
I think he's absolutely right.
Team.
And it's like, it's one of these things that I believe it was Eric Longenhagen talked about it in his recap of the Red Sox draft on Fangraphs. He basically said that some teams models, and he wasn't saying the Red Sox do this, but basically that, like, in
fact, did he expressly disclaim that he was not saying this is what the Red Sox did?
But just that basically the idea was that the models age way too heavily. And I think it's different, as Mark talked about, if you're looking at like a starting pitcher who's 6'5", 190 pounds, like, and grades out really well on certain things, then there's a lot of projection physically there that when he's a 17-year-old versus a 19-year-old is relevant. And I actually think, looking back, when you think about the Red Sox drafts of the past, like Trey Ball was a good example of that. Trey Ball, I believe, was a 19-year-old draftee when he was selected.
That sounds right. I'll look.
Because he was 19. He was born June 94, and he was selected in the first round of June 2013.
Yep.
So he was a 19-year-old, and maybe he didn't end up having any projection at all. He was what he was. And maybe that's something we didn't really take into account at the time, versus maybe if he's a 17-year-old, there's 2 more years of like physical projection there. So I think that, with Jordan, like, him being a first baseman who's already pretty big, how much more is he going to grow? How much more is there, like, projection in the body? Who knows? And I think that's it's a good point.
Yep. Yeah. And the second thing Mark wrote, the Jordan pick on the surface seems easy to identify as model driven. Is there more to it than a really young player with high exit velos? Do you suspect that the underslot in the first gambit may not have paid off and other possible targets were off the board? I understand that running baseball ops in Boston is very different than doing so in Tampa, but we've seen a Bloom-led front office pick up the same type of profile of major leaguer for peanuts, CJ Cron, watch him produce, and then let him go for no compensation. Maybe I'm underestimating Jordan's hit tool, and it is of a special class, or maybe the front office really believes improved positioning can help his defense play up to be passable at third, but I guess I'm having a difficult time making sense of the pick, unless this was a calculated risk that seems to have not played out as the front office might have hoped. Hope I'm not being too pessimistic on this, but we'd love to hear your takes. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. By the way, we should, before we answer this, let's give Mark a shout-out a little bit, Ian. Mark Hanoyan has come in, and he's our scouting coordinator, I think is the title, something to that effect. The reason we have been cranking out scouting reports left and right during this non-season scouting report manager is that Mark has whipped our behinds into shape.
He keeps us organized, which is very helpful.
Doing a great job helping us keep these things organized and get through these. So that has been awesome. So thank you for that, Mark. As for the question, I don't think that their gambit didn't pay off. I think they would tell you that their gambit did pay off. I think Paul Taboni's a great actor.
Yeah, no, this was what they wanted, I think, was the 2 players like this.
I mean, Paul Taboni, the first thing he got asked about, obviously, after night 2 of the draft was about this pick, and he was like, we were ecstatic this guy was there. He said that they had a short list of guys who they were hoping might fall, and one of them was Jordan. Because they do value the bat. They think that he can hit. They think that he can pick up spin out of hand. They think he can. He's not just an exit velo guy. He never mentioned exit velos. He mentioned, scouting type things.
Well, if he hits, then they're going to look like geniuses. So,
right. If he hits, I mean, the pop's there. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's that they don't feel that way. Could they be wrong? Sure. I mean, that's the same thing I say with their following their conviction is great. It also means they might be very wrong. But if you're not going to listen to your guys internally, why do you have them?
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, also with a draft like this in a 4-round draft, if one of these guys makes the major leagues in any capacity, it's a success. I think that's the scale. Like, even if Jordan never plays a game in the big leagues, if Nick Yorke is a utility infielder or somehow, or a utility player, or a DH even, like, this draft's a huge win. Like,
but it is. But I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't try and hit on every pick too, right?
No. Of course. I wasn't saying that.
I'm just clarifying to make sure that that's clear. That that's not what you're saying. So, you take these guys thinking they're all going to hit, either in the literal sense or just in the general sense of a pick hitting. Our next question comes from Travis in Kentucky. What thoughts do you guys have on the concentration of players that were signed by the Red Sox as undrafted free agents being from or playing college in Puerto Rico and Florida? 7 of the 10 signees so far were from Florida colleges or Puerto Rico high schoolers. Obviously, Florida and Puerto Rico are talent hotbeds, and Florida has lots of great college programs, but so does the rest of the Southeast, Texas, Arizona, and California. Is the team selling players on the prioritized convenience of spring training sites and instructional league sites close to where they currently live, given the COVID crisis and what little they will be paid? Other teams seem to have signed from a cross-section of the country, but are players from other parts of the country signing less and opting to stay home for another year of college or sticking to future college commitments at a greater degree? Or am I reading into it too much and it's just more a product of where scouts were able to put in the most work and where players are more greatly concentrated? Travis from Kentucky. Ian, I think it's just random.
I think it's random. And I do think there might be something to like the greater concentration. Like there's going to be there's probably,
more Florida guys.
There's 10x Florida schools compared to like pick another state, even more probably than that, frankly. You know what I mean? But even if you look at it too, now that they've signed a few more guys, like Masayo Campbell's from Longwood, which is Virginia, I believe.
Virginia, yeah. And I mean, you could look at it. I mean, there's 2 guys in Ray Fagnon's Northeast region that they signed.
Yeah, Grand Canyon's Florida. I mean, Arizona.
Yeah, I was going to say.
SIU, Edwardsville is Illinois.
Yeah. It's a lot of the early guys who came in. I mean, it was Dante Ricciardi coming in, gets a draft pick and 2 undrafted free agents. Willie Romay had 3.5 free agents.
I think it's just kind of like how the cookie crumbled. These are the guys they got. Because I'm sure I've heard they were in on a bunch of other guys too. They just didn't get them. So it's these are the guys they got.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's, look, last year, right, 2019 draft from Florida. 7th rounder, Belle is from Florida.
Bell.
What did I say?
Walk.
Oh, I thought I said Brock. Never mind. Brock Belle, SCF Manatee. Will Dalton is from U Florida. Blake Lubier is a high schooler from Florida. Jacob Herbert was a high schooler from Florida. Leon Polino was a high schooler from Florida. I mean, it's just they drafted other guys out of Florida they didn't sign. And
2 of their undrafted free agents were Florida guys too.
Yeah, Florida Atlantic, Zach Snyder, Mason Duke from Tampa. Both of them already been cut, but. It's, there's a lot of guys in Florida. That's why they have 2 scouts and a Florida cross-checker.
Exactly. It's just there's more baseball programs down there per capita. So.
Yeah, and with Puerto Rico, I mean, they have a strong pipeline there.
I also think it's sad to say, but I think the kind of the socioeconomic considerations, like these guys were going to junior colleges. They weren't going to 4-year colleges. I mean, for
they were
some of
planning
them,
on going pro either way.
Yeah. They were their plan was to go pro pretty clearly. So,
yep. I think that's all of our draft questions. So I think we're good. We actually got one. Yeah, I know. We got one more. We did get one more question about Baseball America's draft point. Jason, we'll get to that next time because I don't really even know what that is yet. So we'll take a look at it. I think that's it, Ian. Do we want to? Yeah. Thank you. So thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back at you. We've got more to talk about on our next episode already. We didn't even get to know a song on this episode, Ian. We're going to get to know a song on the next episode. We're going to get to, hopefully by that point, knock on all of the wood.
I think they hate each other again now.
Do they hate each other again?
Yeah, I believe so. I think the owners. I think it was. Where is it? It was coming from the ownership side because it's a John Heyman tweet, so you know who that's coming from. MLB owners are so upset by the player's counterproposal that no response is expected to be immediate, and it's for $300 million more, which is what, $10 million per team.
That's so dumb.
It's pathetic.
That's so dumb. That's less than what some players make in a given year. Oh my god.
But yeah. So anyway, owners are livid again. So
we'll talk about that on the next episode. We'll talk about the Noah Song situation and more of your emails. Again, podcast@soxprospects.com. So get them in. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to Podcast Joe 2.0, who, as we recorded this, cranked out last week's episode. So thanks to Joe for that. Thank you, Ian, for hopping on. Thank you all for listening. Follow the site at Sox Prospects on Twitter. Follow Ian on Twitter. That's at IANCUNDALL. Follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. I want to thank you all for listening. We'll be back in your eardrums next week with another episode of the podcast. Just keep your eyes and ears open. We'll be back with you soon.